This episode is made possible by Walmart Connect. Are you looking to take your media strategy to the next level? Make an impact with millions upon millions upon millions of customers. Walmart Connect harnesses the massive reach of America's #1 retailer. That is Walmart. They can help you connect more meaningfully with Walmart's close to 140 million weekly online and in-store customers to find the right audience for your message. They use Walmart's proprietary customer purchase data to help you precisely target even niche audiences at massive scale. You can head to walmartconnect.com today, tomorrow, whenever you get a chance, to see how they can help you find the customers you want at the scale that you need. Hello, everyone, and thanks for hanging out with us for the Behind the Numbers Weekly Listen, the eMarketer podcast made possible by Walmart Connect. This is the Friday show that has pretty strong feelings about the cost of framing, blinds, video conference software, and when to share your Eclipse glasses.
Don't even get us started.
Watch out for big frame. Watch out, people.
People came in hot
It's
today.
the problem people aren't talking about. Big pharma, no. Big frame, watch out.
It's not. Don't worry about it. If you've not heard of this, you're fine. In today's show, how big takeaways from March Madness, the revolution transforming women's sports, who will rule the pay TV world, is sports betting about to face a reckoning, and what are the most popular cars in America? Join me for this episode. We have 3 people. Let's meet them. We start with our senior forecasting analyst based in Colorado. It's Zach Goldner.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, fella. We've got all forecasting people today. One of our senior directors of forecasting based in New York. It's Oscar Orozco.
Hello, hello.
Hey, fella. And finally, the writer for that team, principal forecasting writer, Ethan Cramer-Flood, also based in New York. Hey, buddy.
I survived the earthquake, I survived the eclipse, and I'm here for you.
Jesus.
Survived the
Ethan, this is already a week later. Come on now. Get over it. You New Yorkers.
That's going to be a dramatic show. And what do we have in store for you? We start with the madness of March, takeaways from the men's and women's basketball tournaments that just happened. Then we move to a brand new game of the week. We'll talk about that later. We end with some random trivia and dinner party data. But we start, of course, with the story of the week. We're talking all about March Madness this segment. More people than ever watched the March Madness college basketball this year. The NCAA tournament started by recording the best viewership in its history over the first 5 days, according to Nielsen, averaging 9 million viewers across the 4 networks broadcasting the games, notes briefings writer Daniel Konstantinovich. That was the men's tournament. If we look to the finals, though, we have some numbers on the finals. The women's game that saw pretty much all of the growth in terms of finals, with the viewership nearly doubling year on year from 10 million to close to 19 million as folks tuned in to see South Carolina beat Caitlin Clark-led Iowa team. In the men's tournament, 14.8 million fans watched UConn beat Purdue. Almost exactly the same number of folks who watched last year's game. One takeaway from this year's tournament or tournaments is from Rachel Buckman and Isabella Simonetti of the Wall Street Journal, pointing out that this was the first time the women's final drew more viewers than the men's, but got 99% less TV money. The last time the men's game reached that women's tournament figure, finals figure of 19 million was 5 years ago. It's the last time the men's finals reached those kinds of numbers. However, Miss Buckman and Simonetti of the Journal point out that the men's entire tournament averaged 10 million viewers per game, far surpassing the women's, which attracted an average of just 2 million viewers, according to data from Warner Brothers Discovery and ESPN. So that's one takeaway. But gents, I'll turn to you for some more takeaways from this year's tournament. All right, Oscar, what was your biggest takeaway from this year's tournament?
such a big draw for advertisers. I mean, it just shows how sports really, because of its communal nature, is really meant to for advertising, for getting people together. We're wired to want competitions, to root for the underdog. The unpredictability of the outcome, and just the story and history behind all these programs. I mean, that to me was the biggest takeaway. I was just couldn't stop watching. I couldn't stop watching the TV. So it brings me back to a stat that we refer to a lot here on the program, which is that sports made up approximately a little over 90, I think it's 93 of the top 100 broadcasts. And this was in 2023. Looking at just prime time, the number is 56 of the top 100 are sports. But again, it speaks to the power of sports, to the fact that it's how you can get viewers together to watch something. There's no better thing to do than to have them watch sports together. I also thought of one other thing. You know how platforms like Netflix and Disney Plus and Prime have tried these virtual co-viewing services. I haven't really heard about that, connected to sports. I know it hasn't quite worked out when we talk about different types of content, whether it's series or movies. But what about applying that to big sporting events? I feel like that would do so well and would be a great pivot, especially as we see these streaming services pivoting more and more to sports programming.
I want to quickly go back to your point about about the tournament being unpredictable, I think you said, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Because I actually went to look. I think it's actually become quite predictable, because I went back and I was, okay, South Carolina, they won the women's game, and then UConn, they won the men. I was like, they sound like pretty familiar names. I've watched college basketball for a long time. Women's not as long, men's for a very long time. And I went back and checked. On the men's side, UConn and North Carolina have won 8 of the last 20. And just 6 schools have won 16 of the last 20. On the women's side, this tournament seemed to be even less unpredictable, even more predictable, if you will. UConn and South Carolina have won 10 of the last 20. And if you expand it to the last 30 years for women's college basketball, just 3 schools, UConn, South Carolina, and Tennessee, have won 2/3 of the available, nearly 20 of the 30 national championships. However, you're right in that the potential of the Cinderella story does capture Americans' hearts and attention. But when you look at who actually wins, it's the same teams pretty much all the time.
I think that's why everyone likes the first 2 rounds of March Madness. It's because those Cinderella teams can win 1 or 2 games, but when it's all said and done with the national championship, it does normally go to the best team.
Yep.
Yeah. Marcus is talking about how predictable this all is, but you'll notice that he's not showing us his bracket. It's real easy after the fact to be like, oh, this is chalk. This is so easy to yeah.
I might have got
somehow.
It right.
Somehow. I did have UConn. A lot of people had UConn. That's not special.
Yeah.
The outcome.
Sorry, go on, Oscar.
Just saying that what it boils down to is, you no matter what, you go into it and have no idea what the outcome is going to be, and what is that 1% chance, 99% hope or faith, I believe it is. That's exactly what this is about, what sports is about. So that's why people tune in, because you just never know what it'll end up coming out to be. Yeah.
Ethan, your biggest takeaway?
My biggest takeaway as a sports fan is that the truism that a mega superstar cannot win the championship without enough supporting teammates still holds, because that happened on both sides. And maybe that is predictable. And actually, that's exactly what Vegas said. So we had a lot of fun watching the 2 dominant players on the men's and women's side, but neither of them brought it home.
Yeah.
And it wasn't surprising, and it wasn't even that close. Iowa kept it competitive, but both of the dominant teams blew them away. That's as a sports fan. From a media and business perspective, my main takeaway was that the Disney Corporation and the ESPN family of networks did a really good job when they locked up their NCAA coverage for the next nearly 10 years. And that massive new deal that emphasizes women's sports, that is going to work out really, really well for them. I mean, this is all going up. I mean, this follows the general trend that we've been talking about, that everyone knows this is also predictable. Live sports is the way to go. It's a way to keep your linear television business working, and it's a way to keep your streaming. It's a way to get your streaming service into profitability. And they are just going to that's just going to work out extremely well. For
Yeah.
what when we look back, I think it's like an 8-year deal. When we look back to what they got this year, 8 years from now, and considering the women's basketball coverage that's a part of, good job.
8 years, $1 billion. That's going to age really well. Yeah, that's a good point.
And the majority of the revenues to that going towards the women's side as well of NCAA. Pretty impressive.
Well, as it should. They're going to make a killing.
Yeah. Well, I do think there's going to be a bit of a drop-off there. I mean, obviously, double the amount of viewership for the women's game than we've ever seen before. Part of that is the Caitlin Clark effect, and she's going to be going to the WNBA, as well as a few other players. There'll be a lot of talent still left, so I do think that they're going to see better numbers that they have, but I think you'll see that come down, maybe obviously quite significantly, and I think she'll take that forward into the WNBA, and you'll see that same bump in the WNBA, which is still for women's sports, but I do think college sports, that number might come back down to earth, because I think the Caitlin Clark was such a huge draw. Zach, your takeaway?
Yeah, before I get into my main takeaway, I want to give a quick shout out to the NC State Wolfpack and DJ Burns. That was a great Final Four run. Everyone really enjoyed watching that. Everyone was wondering if DJ Burns would turn to football. It was a great story, Cinderella story of a team that wasn't going to make the tournament if it wasn't for them running the table in the ACC tournament. But my biggest takeaway is women's basketball. I tuned in to women's basketball for the first time this tournament because of those big names. You had Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark, and it was each game going from the Final Four on was the most bet on women's basketball game of all time. Actually, it was starting back in the Elite Eight with LSU versus Iowa. Every game was the most bet on women's basketball game of all time. And I think that is a really big takeaway point people need to be looking at.
Yeah. So great points, gents. That's all we've got time for this segment. We move to the game of the week for today. Today's game, a brand new one. It's not of course, it's brand new. The Super Duper game. I'd say I'm working on the name. I'm not. It's the best I've got. How does it work? There are 3 rounds. Today we have Slice of Pie, Move the Needle, and the Random Scale. The better the answers, the more points you get. For round 1, we start with Slice of Pie. So folks can choose up to 3 reasons why something is happening, attributing shares to each. So for example, if the question was, what do you hate most about morning people? I'd say it's 60% because they try to drag you kicking and screaming over enthusiastically into their pre-sunrise world, and I hate it. 30% because I secretly wish I was one, and 10% because it's not normal. That would be my pie chart of why I hate morning people. So that's how the game works. That's how the first round works, Slice of Pie. We're talking about there's a revolution transforming women's sports, writes Anna Reynolds of Yonder Consulting in an Adweek article. She notes that in the past few years, we've witnessed significant progress in women's sports. The success of the 2023 Women's World Cup saw women's sports take center stage. EA Sports started including women's teams and players in their video game. And Kansas City Current, the Kansas City Currents, their $117 million stadium opening this spring will become the first facility specifically built for a women's pro team. But we'll start with Ethan for Slice of Pie. Why has growth in women's sports taken off, in your opinion?
Okay, I'm excited to play this game for the first time. I'm going to say 50% the virtuous cycle of increased exposure, 25% Caitlin Clark and a cohort of other stars that created this sort of this perfect critical mass this year, and 25% the general trend of just what is happening with all sports. So the increased exposure is that this stuff is just on TV more and more and more, and has been for many, many years. And the more you see it, the more people have a chance to see it, the more they get into it, the more they're going to keep watching it. And we've seen this effect over and over again. This is happening with a lot more than just women's basketball. This is happening with all women's sports. It's on TV. People like it. They go, and then they come back, and then they go again, and they come back, and it just builds and builds. The Caitlin Clark effect we sort of have discussed already. It's not just her, though. It's the fact that stars need other stars to compete against. Great teams need other teams to compete against. You need to have rivalry. If it had just been her this year blowing everyone away, I don't think that would have been that exciting. We've seen UConn in the past go undefeated for 4 straight years and no one even cared. This was something different, and I think it is sustainable because there's plenty of stars still sticking around, even if the ratings decline next year. That's okay. That's normal in sports. They'll be back up, right? We're here to stay. And then the last one was just that this is what's happening with all live sports in our sort of stratified cultural environment where there's a million streaming services and a million things to watch and everything is sort of getting diluted. All of society is sort of heading towards live sports as the one place where we can sort of all congregate and all watch still. And women's sports is along for that ride.
Very nice. Zach.
Yeah, I think Ethan made some great points there. I'm going to copy a couple. I have 50% going to some of the generational talents that are happening the last couple of years. We're watching them in their heyday, their best times. So we're looking at Caitlin Clark, Megan Rapinoe with women's soccer, Sabrina Ionesco, some big names that people love to watch. And you like to watch them.
Shout out New York Liberty.
But with Caitlin Clark, you're trying to see her in her senior year of college basketball. WNBA doesn't get as great of ratings as NCAA women's basketball. So it's something people are trying to watch their last year, take it in while they can, and appreciate their greatness. Caitlin Clark blew many records. Everyone wants to tune into her games against the big matchups, the repeats against LSU. And then I also have 49% with the media coverage of women's sports. Media properties have really built up women's sports, giving a lot more time on TV, and that has translated over towards viewing time. When talk show hosts are talking about the WNBA or NCAA women's basketball, people are then naturally going to watch the games. So that has been a big reason of more people tuning in. We talked about ESPN's huge deal with the NCAA and how the majority of those revenues are going to women's sports. And then for my remaining 1%, I have Oscar's bracket having Auburn men's basketball losing in the first round to him watching NCAA women's bracket naturally.
What? Are you talking about my Auburn winning it all bracket?
Yeah. Sorry, your team lost.
Did you really have to bring
round.
that up? Did you really have to bring that up?
It's 1%. You're.
I'm proud of my 17th percentile bracket. Okay? I gave it all I had. That's what sports is about.
All right, Oscar, what you got?
Yeah, well, I'm going to start with going to the roots of all of this. And it really starts, and I'm going to say 50% of it is really grassroots, women's sports, investment, acceptance and interest, parents no longer holding back young children anymore from playing, and that's half of it for me. Girls have always been interested, but they're not ashamed to be so, and so they're playing sports from a young age. And of course, many of them grow up to be elite athletes that we have the pleasure of watching on our screens. I also agree that 40% of it, and to Zach and Ethan's points, is media coverage of women's sports. I can put some data to that. Actually, a recent report from Wasserman found that the average share of sports media coverage for women, and this is across social media and broadcasts and streaming and digital publications, has risen to 15% in 2022, more than tripling where it was 3 years earlier. So 15%, they estimate that it could get close to 20% by 2025. So we have a long ways to go, but you have to give some credit to media. And the remaining 10%, I really think, it's the unbelievable athletes that are worth watching. Ladies are upping their game. They're breaking through bad and awful stereotypes and just showing that, how good they are. It's worth, the ticket of admission and paying for it. And we're talking about ladies like Caitlin Clark, Coco Gauff, and maybe going back a little bit further, Venus Williams and Serena and even Mia Hamm in soccer. So that's the other 10% for me.
Very nice, folks. I've got a few numbers here real quick. So viewership skyrocketing. WNBA smashed their highest viewership records this season. A women's college basketball game in January between LSU, number 9, and South Carolina, number 1, had nearly 1.6 million viewers, beating the NBA game airing at the same time. And then obviously we talked about the viewership figures that the Iowa-South Carolina game pulled in 18.7 million, double what they were the year before. The dollar's also going up. According to research by Deloitte, women's sports will generate revenue of nearly $1.3 billion this year, up nearly 300% from just 3 years ago. And then also ad engagement skyrocketing. Our briefings writer Daniel Konstantinovich notes the women's sports are driving high ROI and engagement for advertisers, according to EDO. They said TV ads that ran during women's sports saw double-digit improvements in ad effectiveness, with women's tennis being the most effective of all sports categories. The Caitlin Clark effect, I've said it a couple of times. What does that mean? Games featuring the Iowa basketball superstar outperformed other games' viewership by 7%. This was before March Madness started. Her rematch with LSU, who beat them last year, pulled in 12.3 million viewers, making it the most watched women's college basketball game on record until, obviously, the finals. ESPN's second highest audience for any basketball game in the last 12 years. And that also spills over into ads. She's been featured in State Farm ads. When she's featured in the ads, it's nearly 50% increased engagement over the average State Farm commercial. So just mind-blowing numbers. We move to round 2, and this round is called Move the Needle. Folks have to tell me how much this story will move the needle out of 10. We'll start with Zach for this round. Who will rule the pay TV world? YouTube TV is trending to be the largest pay TV provider in the US by 2026, according to projections from Moffett-Nathanson Research, writes Wayne Friedman of Media Post. Moffett believes that in 2 years, YouTube TV will reach over 12 million subscribers, outpacing legacy cable TV-focused companies like Charter Communications and Comcast, with 11 million and 9 million subscribers, respectively. But we're playing Move the Needle, and so, Zach, the likelihood that YouTube TV is the largest pay TV provider by 2026 out of 10 is what and why?
I give it a 4. I don't see it happening. I think that these estimates pulled out in this article are quite bullish, and YouTube TV has a long way to go in order to reach those projections. So in order for it to reach 12 million subscribers, it would need to gain 4 million. YouTube TV has existed for a handful of years already. That'd be seeing really accelerating growth if that were to occur. I do see traditional TV moving further and further away, so I could eventually see YouTube TV overtaking it, but I see that timeline happening further and further down the line. One thing I do want to call out here is digital pay TV services like YouTube TV and Hulu TV are still not profitable. We're going to expect the prices to have to continue to increase in order for them to make a profit. And if you think that YouTube TV's price hikes are done, I don't think that we've seen the last of it. If you were to compare YouTube TV's price compared to where it was when it launched 6 years ago, it's more than doubled, and we're expecting further increases down the line.
Very nice. Oscar?
This is actually simple math here, gents and Zach. I think the likelihood, I put it at 9 out of 10.
Wow.
And I wouldn't put it I'm not going to put it at 10 out of 10 because I don't believe anything in life is 100% certain, but close to it.
It's a bit intense.
It is. Remember, philosophical, that's what I do. And let me tell you, using our own estimates, I think this is a great job for Moffett-Nathanson here, but we currently estimate approximately a little under 20 million people use YouTube TV. That's viewers, not necessarily subscribers. But looking at our estimates moving forward, we're going to reach almost 25 million in 2024. Considering the U.S. household size, about 2.2 people per household, that would put us at 11 million. So I agree, Zach, it's a little bit bullish, but that would put us right at where the number for Charter actually is. So will it be 2027, not 2026? Potentially, but I think that YouTube TV will very likely get there. And I think that our own numbers show that.
Something that's 100% certainty. Oscar going along on dinner party data. Boom!
Booyah.
Not true. Why are you saying these? Just Ethan says that. Marcus, come on.
Ethan, you're up.
Well, I was this is fortunate because I was sort of gonna say 7 anyway, so I'll split the difference. Although Zach almost talked me into going lower, and then Oscar almost talked me into going higher. I think they probably have more command of the numbers. I think YouTube TV is going to get there at some point. My only concern was that 2026 was a little bit too soon, and I would be cautious against sort of projecting their growth in a straight line outward, because last year they had just explosive expansion thanks to the NFL package. And I mean, we had their viewership growing 45% last year, but this year it's only 10%. Next year it's only 8%, right? So they're not going to keep growing by leaps and bounds. Whereas on the other side, of course, the decline is going to be consistent. Cord cutting proceeds apace, but cord cutting isn't really accelerating either. So when are these lines going to cross? I don't know. 2026 does seem maybe soon, but let's give it a 7.
Something we didn't mention is with the sports streaming bundle. That's expected to get 5 million subscribers once it launches. And Marcus, I don't know if we were planning on talking about that, but that would include in Fox, Disney's ESPN, and Time Warner. So very big platforms for sports that could take more and more viewers away.
Yeah, they've lowballed that as well. There's no way they're just going to get 5 million. I think it'd be way higher. But it's a good point. We move to the final round, all tied up. 4 points each. Final round, round 3, which is the random scale. Folks have to tell me about the chances of something happening using the random scale. The subject for today is sports betting about to face a reckoning? Sports betting giants formed a group for responsible gambling as the NBA and MLB face an integrity crisis, writes our Senior Director of Briefings, Jeremy Goldman. He explains that a group of 7 major U.S. gaming companies, including BetMGM, Fanatics, FanDuel, and others, that represent 85% of the legal online betting market, have set up a trade group called Roga, I guess, pledging over $20 million to promote responsible gambling practices. The Roga initiatives include sharing data on problem gamblers, creating a certification program, and collaborating on education and best practices. For this week's random scale, lowest to highest, the contestants get to choose from, so the question is sports betting about to face a reckoning? The first answer would be no chance, mate. The second one would be perhaps. The third one would be strong maybe. And the last one would be, of course you fool. So we'll start with Oscar. What are the chances sports betting faces a reckoning in the next 12 months?
Yeah, Marcus, is there anything lower than no chance, mate? Can I add like an expletive or two in there to make it a little bit stronger?
Definitely not.
I might have to, because there's no chance. No way.
Bloody chance, mate.
Not at all. How much did they pledge? 20 million. Do you know how much the total sports betting handle across digital and retail sports betting? Yes, just slightly. About 185 billion, more. $185 billion where this was the sports handle last year, and this is across again digital and retail sports betting, so in person as well. It's nothing. It's tiny. We're talking about pennies there. Also, just looking at the Morning Consult survey, which was cited in this article you sent us, Marcus, it showed that 52% of Americans strongly or somewhat support betting. Further, 26% don't care. So it really is just a soft PR campaign, really, to keep regulators and concerned Americans at bay. But it's not going to make much of a difference, to be honest with you. Sadly, those who are addicted will remain addicted, and sports gambling is not going anywhere.
Ethan.
But I do disagree with Oscar. I think it's a strong maybe, but this has to do with the definition of the word reckoning. So something's going to happen. There are problems. We're already seeing it. We saw a problem in the NBA with an investigation on prop betting. We're seeing states like Louisiana are already moving towards banning prop betting at the collegiate amateur level. These are the kind of sort of roiling waters that are affecting the industry, and I think action is going to be taken. There are going to be new restrictions. There are going to be new regulations. There might even be a public health consciousness around gambling addiction and some of the negative consequences. States like California aren't even getting on board. We're seeing a sort of increase in problems at the margins that are going to lead to a reckoning that will not be a game-changing reckoning, but will be something.
Zach.
Strong, maybe. That is my response. I think it should face a reckoning, but I guess the question is, will it?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think so, but it should. I think we've opened up a Pandora's box with sports betting, and it is full of betting slips. We're seeing the biggest players in sports and some of the lesser known players all being involved in it, whether firsthand or indirectly. So speaking of bets, we can talk about the elephant in the room. It's wearing a jersey. Shohei Ohtani, the biggest name in baseball, was alleged to have his translator to be involved, or his interpreter. When you're seeing the face of your sport being involved firsthand with sports gambling issues, there needs to be something done about it. My main concern is with the lesser known players. When you have NIL happening in college basketball now, you're having players that are not making any money and want to be making some money, so they might take advantage of prop betting and other things. And I could see that eventually getting transitioned out, no longer prop betting in NCAA sports. Something needs to be done, and it needs to be done quickly because players and fans are noticing a change in the game.
Yeah, it's not a matter of if, but when, because these amateur athletic, these college guys, some of them are making no money, and they have the opportunity, little, small time players have the opportunity to shift millions of dollars by cheating. And they're not going to, somebody's not going to be able to resist that, and then you're going to have a serious integrity problem. So they're going to have to make some moves.
It does seem
looks
like
I was going to say, it looks like Ethan fall into that 23% of Americans who seem to, be concerned or even opposed. But it's a minority, guys. So, and I also would want to say, Ohtani, he knew what was going on.
It's a really bad look. I mean, Jeremy was noting that the NBA, in terms of gambling seeping into the games themselves, started an investigation into whether Toronto Raptors forward Jonte Porter intentionally kept his numbers low to sway betting outcomes. And then, as Zach mentioned, the superstar LA Dodger Shohei Ohtani denying any involvement in allegations that a former interpreter misappropriated millions from the star pitcher's accounts to fund the gambling addiction and place bets with an illegal bookmaker. I said this number a few times on a few other shows, but I think it's so important. Problem gamblers problem. We talked about problem gamblers a few weeks ago, the folks with an uncontrollable urge to gamble despite negative consequences in a person's life, and how UMass Amherst found close to 10% of American adults were already defined as problem gamblers or at risk of becoming one, and that was 10 years ago. So, a number to watch for sure. Let's count the scores. I don't need to count the scores. Zach wins because of his Pandora's box full of betting slips comments.
Ooh.
Very clever.
Thank you.
Very clever.
Shout out to my mom. Shout out to Oscar for me pulling him down earlier.
Shout out.
Thank you very much.
Where's
You can see the face of disapproval here. It doesn't makes no sense, Marcus.
You get the championship belt and the last word.
Well, thank you very much. I'm gonna keep it nice and short. Thank you.
Okay, that's it. Let's move to dinner party data. This is the part of the show where we tell you about the most interesting thing we've learned this week. We move quickly. Let's start with Ethan.
Sure. Eclipses. Anybody else notice there was an eclipse? Did we talk about that? Oh, did that get mentioned? All right. So I was just poking around and I found some information about eclipse frequency, because everyone's like, oh, the next one's not till 2030 whatever, and the next total one's not for like 100 years or whatever, yada yada. So according to the National Weather Service, guess how many eclipses there have been over the previous 100 years? Don't guess, I'll just tell you. It's actually 228. 228. Now that sounds like a lot, but that's because they're counting, this is solar eclipses, but that's because they're counting everything. Those are not the total ones, right? So 228 partial eclipse, something called annular full eclipse, which was when the moon does go in front of the sun, but it's not big enough to cover it. So partial eclipses are actually incredibly common, 228 times in 100 years, pretty frequent. Total eclipses, 71. Still kind of a big number from our perspective, but this is the whole world, right? So there's actually going to be a total eclipse, I think, next year in Europe or something like that. So we're thinking about it from the perspective of the US, where you have to wait all these decades. But there's 71 total eclipses happening somewhere in the world over the course of 100 years. So there's my dinner party data. It's not that uncommon. It just feels uncommon because you have to be in the exact right place or near the right place. And so it becomes this special event. But if you count the whole world, solar eclipses are pretty common.
Very good. Zach.
My dinner party data is going to talk about the NCAA tournament once again. So this year's NCAA tournament is estimated to have employers lose out on over $17 billion worth of productivity losses. That's a lot of money. That's the same amount or more than some countries' GDPs like Montenegro or Fiji. It could fund NASA's Artemis program to land the next man or woman on the moon. And also, it's more than what could cover Harvard's university operational expenses for over multiple years. So something to be said. NCAA tournament, big deal, both men's and women's, expected to continue to be a bigger and bigger thing as we move forward.
Are you admitting to something, Zach?
Yeah.
Keep an eye.
Oh, no, don't ignore the TV in my background, Oscar.
Forecasting team's responsible for at least half of that number.
That first Thursday and Friday, that's when the effect happens, right?
Very nice. Oscar.
All right. Well, I'm inspired by everything we've discussed today, Jen. So I'm sticking to the theme. I thought I'd wow you with some more incredible feats and stats about women's athletes, viewership figures, things like that just speak to the growth of women's sports. So this year, Tigst Assefa set the new world record marathon time, clocking in at a little bit under 2 hours and 12 minutes, which broke the previous record by over 2 minutes. This was in Berlin, the Berlin Marathon. Seattle Storm guard Jewel Lloyd, she's incredible. Check out some highlights on YouTube if you haven't heard of her. Set the WNBA single season scoring record with 939 points, broke a previous record by 20 points. The NWSL signed a major 4-year broadcasting rights deal with CBS, ESPN, Prime Video, and Scripps Sports. It's worth $60 million annually. Women's soccer. So it's the most significant broadcasting rights agreement for any women's sports league, actually. And I'll finish that off. I mentioned Coco Gauff earlier. I was watching it. I hadn't actually seen this stat, but 3.4 million people, 3.4 million, tuned in to watch her win the U.S. Open. And it's incredible because tennis is popular, but not, as much as other big sports in this country. So big numbers. Go watch women's sports if you haven't. The Olympics are coming up, so it's a good opportunity to tune in and see some incredible athletes compete there.
Very nice. Very nice indeed. All right, I've got one for you real quick about car facts. And a lot of these came from some great visual capitalist articles, so I've got 3 for you. Any guesses on the best-selling cars or car in the country?
Like by my make and model, or what are you talking about?
By make.
I'm gonna guess.
Make and model. Make and model, both.
Bronco.
Toyota something.
It's a horrible guess.
Forgetting
Zach said the Denver Broncos. You said the Toyota something.
Corolla. I don't know, like one of those regular ones you just see
Ford Focus?
No, the Ford F-Series, best-selling vehicle. Car makers. So car makers sold 15 million cars last year. That's up 12% year on year. But the Ford F-Series was the best-selling vehicle, followed by the Chevy Silverado in a distant second, and Ram pickup in third. So 3 trucks, they accounted for 13% of all cars sold. And the Ford F-Series has been the best-selling vehicle in America for over 40 years straight. 40.
America loves its trucks.
2 million cars that Ford sold. Nearly 40% of them were F-Series. So that's the best-selling vehicles. Number 2. This is fascinating. Most popular cars by state. So I'm not going to go through every state, but when you look at the map, you see a few trends by region. So the Ford F-Series, most popular car in the country, but also in the Mountain West region. Everything from pretty much Montana down through Utah, Colorado, Kansas into Texas. All of that region, Ford F-Series. Chevy Silverado is the most popular car in all of the Midwest states, basically from like Minnesota to West Virginia. And then the Toyota RAV4 was most popular car along the East Coast, all the way from North Carolina to New England.
I was going to guess the RAV4, but
see a lot of them.
New York, yeah, exactly. We see a lot of them.
Just those 3 cars covered like pretty much the entirety of the US, but very specifically by region. I thought it was fascinating. fascinating. And finally, America is the second highest vehicle ownership in the world, with 5% of the world's population, but 20% of its cars.
Ooh.
It's too many.
Wow.
For America.
Too many.
You don't
That's
each see 12.
20%, and wow, that's an incredible
just
stat.
Just China ahead, but I'm sure America's way out in front in terms of the percent of the population that owns a car or drives a car.
Yeah,
It is
absolutely.
No, vehicle ownership rate is the highest.
Oh, rate. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Let me
it is the
see.
highest. Is what you're saying.
Yeah, let me see.
Yeah,
Per capita. So the highest is New Zealand.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Good for
Yep.
them.
Learn something new every day.
just
Or
just
not good
out.
for them.
Just
Depends
out
how you
in
feel
front.
about cars, I guess.
Yeah. Not great, New Zealand. Not great. That's what we've got time for today's episode. Thank you so much. Excuse me, to my guests. Thank you to Ethan.
I'm gonna go back and stare at the sun some more. See you guys later.
Please don't. Thank you to Zach.
All right, I'm done with all Eclipse talk for at least 22 years.
Thank you to Oscar.
I just want a rematch, guys. Let's do this again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you to Victoria, who edits the show. Thank you to Stuart, who runs the team, Sophie, who does our social media, and Lance, who runs our video podcast. Thanks to everyone for listening in. We hope to see you on Monday for the Behind the Numbers Daily, an eMarketer podcast made possible by Walmart Connect. Happy weekends. And a huge congratulations, of course, to UConn men and the South Carolina women's team, as well as commiserations to Purdue and the Iowa
And Zach for
Hawkeyes.
winning today's game. Yep.
Oh, yeah, sure. That too.
You must be regretting this already, Marcus. Come
Yeah,
on.
pretty much.